Afternoon, everybody, or welcome. Welcome back to another episode of Turning the Table. My name is Adam Lamb, and I'm here with my good buddy Jim Taylor from Benchmark 60. Hey, Jim.
How you doing?
We are focused on this show specifically on staff-centric operating solutions for today's restaurant challenges. And we're going to get into a little bit of that topic in this episode about hospitality industry and its state of mental health care, or lack of it, should I say. Yeah. And before we get there, I just wanted to make sure that I shouted out to a couple, some friends of ours who have been really great supporters of the show. So I wanted to kind of shout out to Patrick and Jemiah, Rodney, Carl, Scott Turner, all the folks from Seven Shifts and Food Adviz app. You know, they've been consistently our biggest fans and shouting out for us. So I wanted to say thank you very much. And also to give a shout out, believe it or not, to my father-in-law. Yes, that's exactly correct. You'll see right here. My father-in-law has never commented on anything I've ever done on LinkedIn in all the years. And just the other day, he posted he DM'd me saying, "Keep up the good work. Like the info and feedback, Dave." So, yeah. So I guess I'm doing okay. We're doing okay, right?
I think I saw that the only other thing he's ever congratulated you on there was your anniversary.
Yeah, exactly. Which was, several years ago. But, he's a typical Canadian, very kind, very sweet, kind of a hard edge. He coached junior hockey teams for a long, long time. And then eventually was asked to stop based upon some of these old school ways of training and talking to folks. So it's kind of interesting that happened to him, and happened to me in one position where I was asked to leave because some folks did not feel safe around me. Right? They thought that I was creating a hostile work environment. I had a completely different perspective on that particular situation, but I have to say that in the years since then, I've come to understand that our role as leaders means something completely different than it used to be. And consistently, I've seen where folks are commenting on why they're leaving positions, and it has nothing to do with the extra 50 cents or a dollar. It has everything to do with their employer being unable to protect them both either emotionally or physically. So they need to feel cared for in a way that's different. And yet I look back on my career, Jim, and I think that that's probably something that I always wanted to feel like someone was looking out for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It's interesting. I had the same type of feedback at one point in my career too. I'll never forget the first management job I had. My GM actually sat me down and said that I was the problem.
Yeah.
I was getting constructive feedback from the staff, and I thought, well, complaining. And he actually said, "Hey," he goes, "you're kind of the problem." And because I was very much a rule follower in the restaurant. It was like, it was like, you're supposed to carry a tray, so carry a tray, and you're supposed to, keep your thumbs off the rims of the plate, so keep your thumb. And I actually got to the point where I would ask people, you either don't know or you don't care, and I've told you to do this way, so I know you know.
Right.
So that tells me you don't care. Anyways, he was pretty quick to say, "Hey, look, you either need to change the way you address people this way, or you're not going to be the manager anymore because you're the problem." So it was a quick reminder early in my management career that we got to make sure that we come across the right way to people, or they're not going to stick around.
And how did that feedback land with you at the time?
Well, I was the inexperienced, in some cases younger than some of the staff that had worked there for a long time. I wanted to be liked. I wanted to make sure that people felt like I was doing a good job. There was definitely some insecurities in my ability to be a good manager at the time. There was just so much coming at me that I think I pretty quickly tried to flip that the other way, and make sure that I just did whatever I could to make sure my staff loved coming to work every day.
That's interesting. And I think this harkens back to a conversation we had with Alice and Ann on this show. I think that's episode 5 for those folks who want to pull up that podcast. We're talking, about this idea of like, you just get handed the keys one day and say, "Hey, can you close up?" like there's been no formalized leadership training. There's been no sensitivity classes. I mean, if at most, you had to sit through, a 5-minute sexual harassment video in the HR office. But when it comes down to the stressful situations, and, there's nothing more unique and satisfying as a manager and a leader as to get, people from all walks of life and maybe 3 different languages all moving in the right direction based upon your way of being with them. But it's kind of like one of these things that for some reason in our industry just takes a back seat to actually getting the job done, that busyness, right? Yeah. About like if you just getting stuff done, then you need to take a look at, where you're headed, because as a manager, you're doing great, but as a leader, not so great.
Yeah.
So,
I think that one of the lessons that I learned early on in my management career, and really tried to make sure that I, continue to focus on. So it'd be interesting if anybody who I ever worked with listens to this, because they might tell me that I either did a good job or a bad job. But a mentor of mine actually said to me at one point, I asked him, what do you want me to focus on as a manager? When I asked him that, I was asking things like, what part of service or which line item on the P&L do you want me to really work hard on? Mm-hmm. And his response was, I want you to make sure that everyone loves working on the shifts that you run. Mm. And that was it. Because he just said, if people don't love coming to work every day on the shifts that you run, you won't be running shifts. And then you can't focus on anything. So really it was, that for me, I took that and actually tried to give that feedback to a lot of people that I worked with, when they were starting out new in management. This is the only thing I want you to work on. I just want you to make sure that people love working with you.
So, well, what did that look like on a shift? I mean, that doesn't sound like he gave you much direction. So as a young manager, are you trying to, have a personality that everybody likes working with, or like, how do you hold people accountable for the work? Like, what did that look like on a shift where folks really enjoyed working with you at that location?
Well, his way of explaining that, because I kind of asked the same thing. Like, do you want me to just go around and be really nice to everybody all the time, or everybody get, great job? Like, is it just fluff? His philosophy on that, and I carried this through my management career, and still try to, is it was a filter, right? Make sure that everybody loves coming to work every day on the shifts that you're running is the filter for how you deal with people. You're going to give feedback in a more constructive. You're going to take time. You're going to do it, in a productive way. You're going to make decisions that are, going to be beneficial for the business and the team and the customer. It was kind of this filter for how you operate and how you interact with people. But it also, your comment earlier about protecting people, that was a big part of it. It was a filter for how you deal with and interact with people all day.
So you're coming from that perspective first.
Yeah.
It was clear to anybody who had eyes to see that, COVID really did a number on the industry. And what I don't think is apparent to a lot of the dining public is just how hard it was to reopen. I get that, for those folks who were stuck at home and not able to socialize, that coming out to a restaurant is their opportunity to be in relationship with people. And as human animals, we desperately need that connection. So we had people lining up at the doors ready to come in and didn't have enough staff and continued to not have enough staff. And I think the one missing piece, or that's not talked about a lot right now, is I think that the folks in the hospitality industry are having to deal with more stress now than when they did during COVID. And it's one of these situations where everybody wants it, and most operators need the revenue because they're making up for losses. Mm-hmm. And so they really want to push really hard to make sure that everybody's efficient and productive. But very often the people are left completely stressed out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day, when things like shutdowns and reopens and plexiglass and all those things were happening, it was easier for operators to pinpoint exactly what the stress was, right? It was, I'm stressed because we have to close, or I'm stressed because our revenue went to zero, or I'm stressed because I have to figure out how to transition my whole business to carry out. Now it's a combination of all these things: inflation, labor shortages, profit margins, pricing strategy, wages are going up, all these different things. And it's pulling in so many directions. I think right now, so many of the conversations I know you're having too, Adam, is with operators that are just like, I just don't even know where to start.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, the mental health aspect or concern for the hospitality industry is something that I've shared for a long time. Part of it's my story, what I went through coming up in the industry. And I've been doing a lot of work, I'd say probably over the last 12 or 15 years, to not only be a better man, but a better leader than, better mentor than I was yesterday. And that's incremental progress. But one of the things is both you and I are very vocal about the work that the Burnt Chef Project is doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I thought naively that, these types of posts on social media were going to be, I don't know, less than maybe. But my daughter, who knows how fervent I am about this type of work, tagged me in a Facebook comment where this person basically just stated, I can't do this anymore. I'm an alcoholic. I don't eat well. I don't sleep well. My caffeine addiction is too much. I smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a week. I don't do hard drugs, but I still itch. All things considered, it's not so bad. I just can't anymore. I cry a lot. I'm always angry. How do you all keep going on? And that's, it really hit my heart. And so I answered as best I could, relating that I felt the pain, I felt the anguish, and how much pain is that person willing to go through before they actually take action? Because ultimately, we're all sovereign beings and we need to be responsible for ourselves. But this idea that there are folks who are hanging on by their fingernails, and very often those folks are, like I did at one point in my career, just self-medicating with anything that's cheap, available, and at hand in order to ease that pain. So I don't really want to be a bummer about this, but I think it's important to highlight to everybody that, first off, to those who are going through some difficult times, you're not alone, and your voice is valuable, and we need to hear more of it. I made a commitment before bringing back Chef Life Radio, and to go full-fledged on my coaching and mentoring business, that I felt very strongly that I didn't want to lose another hospitality professional to suicide because they didn't have access to resources, that they thought that they didn't matter, that no one wanted to listen. And I think one of the things that I'd like to hear you speak about is this kind of conditioning. When you got that feedback about, oh, you're going to need to change that. I think we're creatures of habit, and we do as we've been taught. So one of the things that I came to understand in my career was that just because it was done to me, or that's the way I was trained, shamed, and conditioned, didn't necessarily mean that I had to do that with other people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and our industry is notorious for doing things the way they've always been done. In lots of ways,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whether that's strategy, whether that's, cost modeling, whether that's, how to write a menu, or whether that's how to deal with people,
Right.
And I think to people like that individual that made that comment, just call us, let's find a way to get in touch. I shared a thing a couple weeks ago about that. I just wish I wish we could get to a point as quickly as possible, and I still do, that everyone just loves working in restaurants again.
Yep.
And I've had a couple of interesting, lots of people say I agree, which is awesome. Lots of people say, what do you mean again?
Yeah.
Like, as if to say, I never tried it, which, everyone's, got their own. But
Right.
A lot of people saying things like, there's too much change that needs to happen, or this is going to take decades, or this is going to take, a combination of policy and, approach and all those different things at the same time in order to accomplish that. Well, that's fine. And Adam, this, one of my personal missions is to change the way the entire industry looks at how it protects its people.
Correct.
Like really think about it in terms of like, let's go back to cavemen and, you know, I stay awake while you sleep so the saber-toothed tiger doesn't eat. You know, we
Right.
need to find ways to protect people, because you're right. There's too many of those. I can't do it anymore. I left. I had a woman send me a message about, she was worried about her son because he was so stressed out that he not only did he leave the industry for another job, he left the industry and couldn't work.
Right.
So, you know, we definitely need to do this. And Shane, you know, I know Shane and I have been back and forth having conversation here about a little bit for the last few months, and he's got lots of experience and a good comment here about chefs sit in their car like that and cry. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. I interviewed one of my best friends, one of my longest friends. He's a very successful chef. He's out in Hawaii, and he says to me, props to James Shirley, by the way. He said to me, like, you ever been in a job where you just, whenever you're alone, you just want to cry? Like the frustration for whatever reason is just so much, whether, you know, no one wants to listen to you or you're working too hard or whatever. And again, don't want to be a bummer, but definitely want to make sure that everybody's aware that the need for this type of work, this type of outreach is even more necessary now. So, and Jamie Lauren is watching us on Facebook, and she says, so gut-wrenching and true AF. And I don't necessarily want to, you know, it's kind of like I don't want it to be kind of depression porn, right? Like, okay, so we know there's a problem. Now, what are we going to do about it? Because, and I can't speak for anybody else, Jim, but I know for a while in my career, I would not, you know, I could see somebody struggling and I purposely would not approach them, because to start a conversation and open up at that time what I thought was a can of worms meant that they probably weren't going to be able to finish the shift. And that meant that I had to shift people around. So very often I was looking the other way, shamefully, and now advocate, teach, and mentor other ways of being. But I want to first talk about this very, I want to say non-traditional way of acting, which is Benchmark 60 has a productivity metric that which is a solution to operators. And I love it because it's kind of it's not subversive, but it's kind of sneaky in a little way, because basically we're approaching operators by saying, listen, you're struggling right now. You can see that. And let's look at labor this way, as opposed to how we've always done it. And the resulting, the result of that is a metric by which, without even stepping into their restaurant, we know if it's over a certain, you know, if it's 0.1 over what that metric's supposed to be, we know that everybody in that restaurant had a really shitty shift.
Yeah.
Right. That they worked too hard.
Yeah.
And who wants that? Right. So can you speak a little bit more about the applications that you've seen in some of the changes that operators were actually able to achieve based upon your, not only your coaching around the data analysis, but also allowing them to see the opportunities within their own organizations?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's, you know, we refer to that as it's called workload management. And it's really interesting, that conversation with restaurant operators, because I think naturally we all think of workload as, what side work do you have today? Or what are your, how big is your section? Or, you know, the one chef that can butterfly a case of chicken breasts faster than the other. I remember the guys that I used to work with, they always had contests to see who could do it the fastest. You know, so it's like, how much work can one person get done in a certain shift? And that,
right.
You know, I'm biased, but my belief is that the beauty of how we look at some of this data is that it's not about one person. It's not about one shift. It's not about someone's skill or that type of thing. It's actually about how hard does the whole team have to work in order to achieve the result the business wants to achieve. And like you said, we can actually say to them, your team is having to work too hard to get this done. And that's not a good thing, typically. because it causes, burnout and stress. And so, Adam, you and I have talked a lot about this, but where a lot of this came from was that we did a bunch of research that showed us that labor cost as a percentage of revenue, when that's the metric that restaurants measure, which pretty much every restaurant does, in my experience at least, it's the number one cause of stress, anxiety, mental health challenge, addiction. We don't need to go down the rabbit hole of what else that causes. So if we can find a way and actually use real information and data to protect how hard the team has to work, we can connect that directly to morale, retention, turnover, mental health challenges, and at least what the business is causing side of it. Right. So it's definitely helping a lot of restaurants get better perspective on how hard their team has to work. And the thing I love about it is we've done lots of cool work with companies who are actually creating messaging for their team in their manuals and in their training that says, as a company, we have a policy and a procedure to protect how hard you have to work so that you don't get burnt out.
Yeah, I can't imagine that that is just a catalyst for a lot of different change. And, I just want to reference a comment by Shane when he says, we need to learn to communicate. We've learned how to say, yes, chef, so we can learn how to say, when I shouted at you during service, I was not at my best. I'm trying to do better. I'm sorry. So this whole idea of transparency and vulnerability, it's one of my values that I work and live at, and understanding that, I can't ask anybody else to be vulnerable if I'm not going to do that first. And admitting your mistakes is a great way to start with that. And to Shane's point, that it can't just be that. You can only hear "I'm sorry" so many times before there's a seed change, and people go, well, that's cool, because now it's just words and not really landing with me. So while there's a data approach, there's also a behavioral modification approach, which is behind the work that I do with chefs and hospitality professionals about transmuting a lot of this crap that we've carried around with that would cause me to yell at somebody so that we can actually get on with the business of building the hashtag new hospitality culture. And I just wanted to speak to a couple of resources that are out there, if you don't mind, Jim. So, everybody, we talk about the Burnt Chef Project a lot, but they are continuing to expand all the ways that they can actually help and support people. So there's, there's the call line. They're actually working on an app. They're connecting with all these people. And for me, it's very, very important to make sure that everybody understands here in the United States that, the Burnt Chef Project has done lots of different research, and they've said, 84% of hospitality professionals have had at least one mental health incident in their career, and almost 70% of them are not going to say anything to their family, to their friends, or to their coworkers. So again, not only are you struggling inside, but now you can't talk to anybody. So what a burden that is. So, here in the United States, the Burnt Chef Project has a free service, and you text HOME, HOME, to the number 741-741, and somebody calls you back within about 5 minutes with a list of resources that you can have. And there's also other organizations out there called like Not 9 to 5, which is doing some important work. And if you go to their website and click on the coalition button, you'll see all the other organizations that are actually committed to changing. And again, Shane is chiming in with it's all trauma, man. We all had it, and we're constantly reacting it just in different ways, and couldn't agree more, man. And yet there is a way to transmute that trauma into something that's good and positive, so that the other people around you are lifted up from that. And the other one that I really love is I Got Your Back, which is Patrick Mulvaney, who started this project basically on a whim, him and his wife, in the restaurant. And it's created this huge opportunity for other organizations to tag along with it. And it's basically, during pre-meals, you're actually checking the temperature of your organization verbally. And there are people who wear a little purple button on their jacket, and every time they go around, they're the person that if someone's struggling, they can go to. So there's what we can do afterwards, but these preventative measures, I think, are very powerful, Jim. Again, back to the benchmark 60 routine, which is, I would love to be able to show my staff, show them, not just say, but show them that, hey, we're actually doing something to protect your workload.
Yeah.
Yes, we should work hard. However, we don't want it too hard, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's something we talk about a lot with operators is there's a difference between, it's okay to have to work hard, but there's a difference between hard work and having to work too hard, that it actually has, residual potentially negative effects. And, we were talking about this the other day as a group too, that, it's way more productive as a business or as an operator or as an industry to take the time to protect our people than it is to try to talk about burnout or turnover or people quitting after and trying, oh, well, we'll change, we'll do something. I'm sorry, can you stick around? We'll pay you another dollar. Just invest the time in advance to make sure we, like I said, protect them from the saber-toothed tiger that we know is coming after them, right? That's part of the change that we need to see.
And, it's been my experience that there are a lot of people out there who will blame the industry, quote unquote, the industry, for a lot of the stuff that they're going through. And while that may be productive in the moment and make them feel better, really what's happening is it's hard to feel like you can change the situation if it's attributed to something outside. So that's why from my space, I am constantly reiterating that, no, we are the industry. And as we come together as a cohesive force moving forward towards a specific goal, which is to create supportive, equitable workplace cultures, it can't just be blaming somebody else. We're all responsible for this, is what I'm trying to say. So as we continue to work together, then things start changing a little bit.
So solution wise, I think we need to, speaking of, you were giving shout outs to people a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. We need to shout out to you a little bit here, Adam, because of all the people that I've met in this industry, and, you and I spent a lot of time together, especially recently, talking about how to move some of this forward. I can honestly tell you, man, I think you do a better job and communicate better about the things you do personally to protect yourself than almost anyone I've ever met.
Thank you.
From sauna to, groups. I won't say what all that stuff is, but you can share what that stuff is if you want to.
Sure.
But,
sure.
I know that's something I need to do a better job of sharing the things that I do to try to make sure that I'm still good. But, you're just incredibly good at that. And I think your story is awesome.
Thanks. And I appreciate that, Jim. I'm letting it in and receiving. Thank you. And I also wanted to speak to Shane's comment from a little while ago, is that, as hospitality professionals, very often we have like very porous boundaries. We don't hold very strict boundaries. I mean, that's, I look at myself and how many times I ended up in a romantic situation that I shouldn't have been in. And that was because I didn't have very good boundaries. And I got used to having instant gratification. So when there was something that wasn't going right in my life, very often I would go the conquest way because it fed a need within myself. So this idea of having creating healthy boundaries for yourself and then articulating that to your employer is very, very powerful. Like you can say no. You can say no. As a matter of fact, to rip off the Burnt Chef project, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
If you're feeling it, great. If you're not feeling it and you're going to go to work anyway, then that's probably something that you want to take a moment to look at, because you're probably saddled with some responsibility that you think is yours. And I get that everybody needs to make money, but we have to be able to hold our boundaries, or else, we're going to get run over because the business is changing. The stresses are not going to go away. So part of that is like how you actually deal with that stress and know when enough is enough. Yeah. Reaching out for help, speaking to somebody. Like you said, Jim, you and I are available almost all the time, and want to make sure that everybody understands that there is, if you're struggling, there is a solution. And I could go into much more detail about some of the things I've seen and what's happened to other people, but I'm not going to do that. Like you said, it's about solutions. So I encourage everybody listening to do their research, check out I Got Your Back, because it's something you can implement in your organization tomorrow that will make a difference. And just consider that when you start making a change, people are going to not know what's going on because they're so used to you showing up in a certain way, and now all of a sudden you're showing up a different way. You want to preface it by saying, hey, listen, found the solution. Listen to this podcast, watch this live stream. I think this would really benefit. Does everybody, can we get consensus that at least we want to try? So that point to Shane about, needing to communicate, where we are headed as an industry into the new hospitality culture, communication is the number one thing. We have to have fluid, transparent, vulnerable conversation so that people understand that we're not just looking at them as a position on a schedule or a pair of hands, that we are actually employing whole human beings. So,
you know what? That just reminded me. Sorry, Adam, just to jump in there. The whole human beings thing. I don't think it really ever clicked with me for a long time when I was in operations. And now it's one of those things that it's like when you buy a red car and then all the cars you see are red.
Yeah.
I don't think this ever really registered with me for a long time. And now I hear it all the time, and it jumps out at me every time. When people in operations in restaurants or any other industry, they say, oh, how many bodies do we need today?
Right.
How many schedule another body? It's like, is that what they are? They're just bodies? I think it's one of those things, and I catch myself all the time. I was talking about this with an operator the other day, that can you try to change that terminology to people? Mm-hmm. Because it will, again, if we're looking for a filter, that for me is, I've really been trying to hone in on that in conversations that I've been having about, let's make sure that we refer to the people that we work with as people, because that's a place to start.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. I think the words we choose to use have incredible power. Not only the intonation, but the words themselves, and they imply a certain amount of understanding or not understanding. Like, pair of hands. I need a couple pair of hands over here. I need a body over here. Da, 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 da. And because we like to please, because we're in the service industry, we're all over. Yes, chef. Absolutely, chef. You bet, chef. And that can be troublesome, and especially because you get to a point where people start to relating to one another as just bodies, less than, fully functioning whole human beings with, dominion over their hearts and minds, and sovereign, right? Like, I love that idea that they're now starting to do in Germany and in Canada about, you can't call your employee up on their day off. It's illegal. You get fined. And as I said before in other shows, doesn't have to become law for you to go ahead and think that that's a good thing for your organization. Mm-hmm. So all these resources are available, whether you're looking at them as an individual or saying, hey, heard something on this podcast, I think it's pretty good, giving it to your boss. I don't know of too many restaurateurs, owners, or GMs who don't want to take better care of their people. But sometimes, because things are going at such a rapid pace, they might miss it, or maybe not understand that that's the biggest challenge that they have. I think both of us are completely down with this concept of the biggest challenge that anybody will ever have in the hospitality industry is their people. Mm-hmm. And if you can master that, everything else is just a detail. I don't care what technique you're using in the kitchen or how difficult it is. If you can be a master mentor, then everything is easy, man. So,
well said,
Jim. I want to thank you as always. Any last words before we kick off?
I think that that we could have this we're here at 35 minutes. We could have 35 hours.
I know.
It's a pleasure to just get the chance to continue to talk to you about how we can move the needle on this. Just
Thank
our
you.
industry needs the opportunity to just take better care of people.
Thanks. You can find out more about Jim Taylor and the work that he does at Benchmark 60 at benchmark60.com. And you can find out more about me by going to the LinkedIn or the Linktree address in my profile. And we'd love to work with you if you're looking for some assistance in creating a great environment for your staff, promoting your retention, and becoming a preferred employer in your market. So thanks very much. Appreciate you listening. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.